Today we're going to be cooking side dishes for Indian food. We're going to be doing a Saag Aloo, we're going to be doing a garlic and mushroom flavoured rice, and simple and easy flatbreads. Okay, let's get started on the flatbread. Going to need about 70 grams of plain yogurt. Going to need 70 grams of plain flour. I'm using the gluten-free, but keep the bag out because we may need a pinch more once we start to mix the ingredients. Going to need a couple of turns of black pepper and a pinch of salt. So what we're going to do, add a few turns of pepper to the flour and a little pinch of salt. Now we can combine those ingredients, just give them a quick mix in. If you want to make a bigger portion or a smaller portion, as long as you keep the ratio of yogurt and flour roughly equal, you'll end up with a good product. Okay, now that they're just combined, put that into a mixing bowl, and then we're going to add the yogurt. Now I'm going to combine this with a mixing spoon, a rubber mixing spoon. If you try to do it with your fingers, it's so sticky, you'll just make a mess. So what we want to do is combine those two together. It does take a little while. You want all the flour and the yogurt combined. Just keep mixing it around. Until we start to form what looks like a thick dough, as you can see there. If you find that it's a little too wet, just a tiny sprinkle of flour, keep mixing it and repeat as needed. And eventually you should end up with a mixture that you can form into a ball of dough, like so. So there we go. So what I'm going to do is just let that sit for 5 minutes or so. So just to make sure that the flour and the yogurt have all combined together. The flour is soaked into the yogurt essentially. So we'll just let that sit for a few minutes and then we'll move on to the next stage. Okay, that's been sitting for a few minutes. So as you can see now, we have a dough that we can now handle. It's a reasonably firm ball of dough. Might want to add a little bit of flour to your fingertips before you start working this into shape, because it can get quite sticky. So what we're going to do is just take a little piece, little ball, like so, and then we're going to flatten that out in our hands to any shape you like until it's about 5 or 6 millimeters thick. Then we're going to just drop that into a non-stick pan. So I'm just going to do a couple. You want to make them all reasonably consistent in the amount of dough that you're using and about the same thickness, therefore they'll all cook at roughly the same time. This does get rather sticky if your hands are warm, but adding a little flour does help. So there we go, that's just gone into a normal non-stick frying pan, no oil or anything. So let's move over to the hob and get those cooking. Okay, so now that we've got the pan on the hob, we can put them on a medium heat and just let them sit for a minute or so that the bottoms start to cook, and then we can start flipping them over. Not added any oil or anything to the pan, just a decent non-stick pan will do. You can cook these in bigger batches, you could have easily fitted 4 or 5 in this pan, but I'm just cooking a small batch today. Once these are cooked and you're almost ready to serve them, you can put them into an oven-proof container and just put them in your oven at about 140 degrees to sit and wait until you're ready to take them to the table. That gives you time to get on with serving your rice and everything else. Okay, once they've had a minute or so, you can flip them. The bottoms will have sealed enough that you can just flip them over with a small spatula. Then apply a little bit more heat, and they're going to need a couple of minutes aside to brown. You can always push them down a little bit with a spatula if that helps. As you can see, there's a little bit of colour starting to form on them now, and eventually they will start to puff up. They're somewhere between a naan bread and a pita bread when they're finished, but they're very simple ingredients and very easy to cook. Okay, just going to let those sit on that side now for about 2 minutes. Okay, they've had a couple of minutes on one side and I've just flipped them over, and as you can see they're really starting to look like a traditional flatbread now. Getting a nice bit of colour on them. We'll let them cook through on the other side for 2 to 3 minutes, keep moving around the pan, but they're really starting to look like the finished product now. Okay, they've had a couple of minutes on that side. We can flip them over again, and as you can see they are now cooked, looking and sounding like a traditional flatbread. So we can knock off the heat, transfer them to an oven-proof container, and then pop them in the oven at about 120, 140, just to keep them warm while you continue with the rest of your dishes, and then they can come to the table in this bowl to keep warm and ready to eat. Okay, let's get started on making the Saag Aloo. What we're going to need is a reasonable sized onion, about 300 grams of potato, some spinach. I'm using the frozen stuff and I've got 6 pieces of it today. You're going to need some garlic. I'm cheating and using the lazy stuff in a jar. You're going to need some turmeric, some whole grain mustard, some garam masala, and some cumin, and a little salt and pepper. Okay, just going to start by peeling and chopping the potatoes. Okay, that's the potatoes prepped. I've just peeled them and cut them into reasonable sized chunks. Okay, going to pop those into a saucepan. And then we're going to add just a flat teaspoonful of the turmeric. And we're going to cover them in boiling water. They only just need to be covered. As you can see, we now have a flavoured stock that we're cooking the potatoes in, so we're going to add a little bit of flavour from the very start. So I'm going to pop these onto the hob, I'm going to bring them to the boil, and then I'm going to let them simmer on a low heat with a lid on for about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, that's the potatoes cooked, and as you can see they're a lovely yellow colour. They've taken on the colour of the turmeric and the smell really good. So they've been simmering for about 15 minutes, just drained them, stuck them there, ready for when we add them to the final dish. Just going to peel and very finely chop an onion. Okay, that's the onion prepped. So we're going to head over to the hob now, take all the other ingredients and spice with us, and we'll start finishing the dish off. Okay, you're going to need a decent sized frying pan, which we're going to put on low heat. Going to add a good glug of oil, about 60 millilitres I would think. This can be good olive oil, rapeseed oil or vegetable oil. Into that we're going to add the onions. A good heaped teaspoonful of the garlic. A heaped teaspoonful of turmeric. A heaped teaspoonful of garam masala. And a level teaspoonful of cumin. Now we're going to stir all of that into the oil. And coat everything in those spices. So you can see that's already getting a colour on it as the onions are getting nicely coated. What we're going to do is we're going to leave that on a low heat, moving it every minute or so, just for 2 or 3 minutes to soften those onions. Okay, that's had 3 or 4 minutes now cooking and everything's nicely softened. So now we can add a heaped teaspoonful of whole grain mustard, decent pinch of salt and some black pepper. And stir those in. Okay, now that's all nicely combined, we want to add the spinach. Again, keeping it on a low heat, just want to combine all these ingredients. And just break all that spinach up and mix it in with the onions. At this point we can bring the potatoes in, just pop those in. And again, gently mix them in. Don't want to be too rough at this point because obviously these potatoes are cooked and they will start to break up. Just gently fold the ingredients over them and move them around. Now we can add a little more heat and start really cooking through that spinach. What we need to do is now cook this for about 4 to 5 minutes. Moving it around every now and then with the spatula, maybe every 30 seconds or a minute or so. Okay, there we have it. That's had about 5 minutes and I've been turning it regularly. So that's now finished. So we can knock off the heat and that's ready to go into either onto the plate or into an oven-proof container which you can pop in the oven at about 120, 140 degrees just to keep it warm while you prepare either your rice or the rest of your curry, everything, and then you can bring it to the table in that oven-proof dish ready to serve. So I'll just transfer that over. there we have it. That's Saag Aloo, ready to eat. Okay, I'll just pop this in the oven and that will stay warm, ready until I need it. Okay, let's get started on making garlic and mushroom rice. So let's start off with rice. Going to need, this is for 2 people, about half a builder's mug full of long grain rice. Then you're going to need about twice that amount of water. So in this case a full mug. Going to need level teaspoonful turmeric in with the rice. We're going to need some garlic. I'm cheating using the easy stuff from a jar. And again, going to need about a flat teaspoonful in with the rice. And we're going to add that boiling water. Give that a little stir around. And we're going to pop that on the hob, bring it to the boil, then drop it to a simmer, and all of that water is going to absorb into the rice. So all of the flavour that we've got in there is going to absorb in. So I'll pop this on the hob. Okay, while the rice is on the hob, simmering away, we can prepare the garlic mushroom. So all we want to do is take 3 or 4 mushrooms. I'm using a chestnut mushroom because they have a nice dark colour and they stand out well. If you use a white one, they tend to just disappear into the final product. So what we're going to do is just chop these into small pieces. Okay, there we go, they're chopped into smallest pieces. So what we can do is add just a splash of oil, olive oil in this case, to a frying pan. And we're going to add, again using the lazy garlic, about half a teaspoonful into there. Then we can add the mushrooms. And we can head over to the hob and fry these in. Okay, what we need to do now is fry the mushrooms and the garlic together. We don't want to burn them, so we're going to start on a fairly low heat. Just work those around until they've got a light coating of the oil on them. Now once you're happy that that's all combined, you can add a little more heat and then just stir them around until they're cooked for a couple of minutes. Okay, as you can see, they're cooked. They've had 2 or 3 minutes. Got a little bit of colour on them. They've softened up nicely and they've actually reduced down. So we can leave the heat on a low setting, go back over to our rice, which by this point has absorbed all the water. And then we can bring that over to the pan. As you can see, that's nicely cooked, it's absorbed all the water, it's got a lovely colour, a lovely smell. So we can now add that to the frying pan. And on that low heat, we're just going to combine all those ingredients together. Just making sure that that mushroom is nicely mixed in. You can see that's all nicely combined, so what we're going to do now is transfer that into a heat-proof dish that we could then take to the table. Okay, there we have it. So what we can do now is pop that into the oven at 120, 140 degrees just to keep it warm. It can sit there for 5 or 10 minutes keeping warm while we finish off serving everything else. and then that and the side dishes and anything else can come out to the table all in one go. So I'll just pop this in the oven to keep warm. Okay, there we have it. There's our 3 side dishes that have been keeping warm as I've made each one in the oven. Obviously you could make these all concurrently. Start off with the potatoes, then the breads, then the rice. But they do keep warm in the oven okay, as long as you keep a fairly low heat. And then these are all ready to go to the table. I hope you've enjoyed today's video and found it useful. If you have, perhaps you'd give it a thumbs up. Maybe consider subscribing to the channel and hit that notification bell so you'll get alerts when I release future videos. Thanks for watching.